Okay, looks like we're live. Hey, everybody. This has been one of those days. I'm running a little bit late on my end. Actually did a commute today and hit the first big long traffic jam of the semi-post-pandemic era, which it's not, but it feels like it's starting to be. How you doing, Sujan?
I'm doing well. It sounds like you went through the Suez Canal and you got here in time.
You know what? I was moving the packing on the ship myself just to push it back, and it seemed to work. So we're good. It's me. I did it.
Wow.
Oh, hey, everybody. Welcome to Tech Chat Tuesday with hosts Ken Rimple.
Sujan Kapadia.
And glad to be here. So we got a smorgasbord of stuff here. Let's start off first. Let me share my screen and talk about, as usual, Philly Emerging Tech 2021, because it's coming up and coming up soon. So let's see here. We got May 4th to 6th, 2021. It's, I believe, $89. And there is now a buy 3, get 1 free promotion going on. So if you're in a company, you want to send 4 people, you basically get a discount by signing up 4 people. You sign up 3, you get a coupon, get the 4th free. And so that's going on in the purchase tickets section on phillyemergingtech.com. We are continuing to kind of round out the website and get everything updated with all the talks and the abstracts. Our keynotes right now, Alan Kay is a keynote, and he's one of the pioneers of computing. He helped invent personal computing by building the graphical user interface, I believe, at Xerox PARC, also contributing to the first object-oriented programming language. And so he's amazing. He's got a 23 Turing Award, and he is open to speaking at ETE and was thrilled to do it. So we're looking forward to seeing what he comes up with.
I love his. If you look up his quotes, he has an awesome quote about people who are really serious about software should make their own hardware.
Wow! Yeah, that's interesting. I must not be that serious about software. That is amazing. Okay.
I let the cloud make it now for me. You know.
What's that?
I let the cloud make the hardware for me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I just saw a tweet. It was a tweet from. Oh, I forget, someone over at Oxide Computer that was something like that. And I thought, well, you guys are building hardware for cloud, so you would be able to say that. We also see Kent Beck. He's the author, one of the people who created Extreme Programming, the originator of it. And we've got a number of other people, from the Java language architect at Oracle, Brian Getz, also another Oracle person interviewing him. And we have an interview on Project Loom, one of the developers and the architects of that. So that's going to be really interesting from the Java perspective. So we're looking forward to seeing him. Jessica Kerr is coming back. David Nolan is coming back for Closure Scripts. Nithya Ruff, who we just did an interview with for open source, 30 years of open source in Linux. We've got Elm developers. We've got talks on things like security with Daniel Dagan. And so just great stuff. It's really shaping up. You can take a look at the abstracts that we have so far if you go to sessions, and you can get a feel for that. And I can't speak more highly about this conference. Ever since I started at Chariot 13, 14 years ago, it's been one of my passions every year, and hopefully you enjoy it too. It's still going to be online this year. Hopefully next year that's all done. But it'll be 3 days where we have at least, I think, 5 to 6 hours a day of content. So we don't, bombard you with 8+ hours a day of video. And that's that. Let's see. In addition to that, we got news. So I started off thinking it was going to be another slow news week. And I was wrong, Sujan. It is a busy news week this week. So, some weeks are quieter and you're like, oh, what am I going to talk about? This one, there's just a ton of stuff.
Wow. 50 years of tech schemes. 50 years? Wow.
So did you play the original Colossal Cave Adventure in Zork and stuff like that?
I've played a little bit of Zork, a little bit of each of those, but I don't remember any of the details, and I definitely didn't get all the way through. That's for sure.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's what always happened with those games. The reason I found this if50.substack.com site, which is really a cool kind of recapping of all the people that wrote interactive fiction, is I found this article on a game called The Hobbit in 1982. So this was a game written by Veronica Megler and Philip Mitchell. Now, Veronica Megler, she would build her own hardware and things like that. And this was at the time, because it was one of the last days of the Women in Tech Month. I wanted to highlight her because she would go to, computer stores or electronic stores with her parts to build things for, and they would do the typical, "Oh, who are you buying these for?" She's like, "Me." So, but not only was she really, really good at hardware, she wrote her apps in Z80 assembler. So
see, she was really serious about software, so she built her own hardware.
it's right there, right there. And all these text adventure games kind of start with like a description. You've got some sort of opening text. You've got, what you see with the items. And we play like this now with online fiction where it's graphical. You've got your inventory. You still look for your inventory. You pull things out. You use them. So that's still going on today. People still play roughly the same way, but just with a graphical interface. But the thing that was interesting about hers was that this game, The Hobbit, she tried to make the non-player characters automatons that actually change their mind and have randomness to what they do. Now, think about that from writing something in assembler and testing it, right? Is this a bug? Or is this like behavior that the automaton, like, so Gandalf, the wizard, right? Sometimes Gandalf would help you out. Other times you just say, no, I'm not going to help you. So it's really cool. This is a great thing. So she's from Australia, and she worked in a college. She was a computer science student in University of Melbourne, and she was looking for money. And so she found out that someone wanted to do some part-time programming and pay $10 an hour. Turns out that someone was trying to start an Australian software company, and they wanted to make games for the UK market, which was really taking off at that point. So hence the ZX Spectrum was the computer they were looking at. And they were looking for someone to write an adventure game. So this is a really fascinating discussion about, and I'll let you read the article about the way that the game interacted with the user, the challenges of writing it, the challenges of testing it, the interactions she had with a team of other people, and just it's a fun article. And so here's an example of some of the code that you would have to debug to try to figure out what's going on. So it was like a proto AI. I mean, back then, everything you played, if you played Zork, you knew the patterns. There was maybe a tiny bit of randomness, but you could trace and figure out the map. If you figured out the maze already, the maze would be the same. In this game, if you walked into a maze, the maze would be different every time you play the game. So a lot of people like this game because it made it fresh every time you played it.
Wow,
so,
nice.
Yeah.
I have to say that looking at that piece of text at the beginning of the game, last year of COVID lockdown, life has felt like a text game.
You go to your house.
Online, everything is through, the computer. You're like vicariously living through reading the internet.
Open door to bathroom. Door is open. You see on the counter soap. Wash soap with hands. All right, or wash hands with soap. I like wash soap with hands better, frankly. All right. Let's take a look at, I'm going to jump a little further out. So let's look at React and D3JS.
All right, just put me on the spot, Ken. Jeez.
I know. Well, I'm trying to be random about this. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just playing around. So back in the day, I did a little bit of D3JS on different projects. And it's always one of those things that are kind of hard to get started with just because it's like the low-level assembly language, I call it, of building graphical elements on a website.
Mm-hmm.
Or website. You're doing charting. It gives you a lot of power to build data-driven, responsive charts, components, graphics, vector graphics, etc. And then there's different libraries on top of that use D3JS to give you like higher level components. What this page does, and there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about, is talk about how to use React with D3JS, which people struggle with because, as they mentioned right here, they both want to handle the DOM.
Yep.
So when two different technologies are trying to do things at the DOM at the same time, it can get really messy, really hard to debug, and frustrating as all heck. So this person goes through, actually, what's their name here? Wattenberger.com. So they go through, if you can scroll through the website, creating SVG elements. And I like how they have a code sample. They have a live rendering of that. And then they have further examples that go along. Okay, how do you do SVG? How do you do, what is D3 doing? What is React doing? And kind of incorporating things so if you keep scrolling down, it keeps getting more and more complex at each step, and creating many SVG elements. And it gets into like creating axes and things like that. So anyway, I like how this site is organized, or this page rather, because there's very clear, easy to read code samples that are small snippets with call outs on the right side of what each piece of significant piece of code is doing, with live action examples that you can use. So, if I wish I had this when I was doing this stuff.
Oh man,
with React in this, because it gives you a really easy way to see how the two interact together. So anyway, I just think that I haven't checked out other pages on this guy's website to see if this is his approach to how he does all his tech articles, but it's laid out really well and really informative.
This is amazing even here. Like, just the fact that he's doing all these different, transformations and all this code, this is amazing. And so where does this start becoming D3? Oh, there it is, D3 GeoPath. Okay, cool. So I guess he jumps in pretty early on with the D3 stuff.
Yeah, I think he tries to incorporate both and how you would use each together.
Right. And I guess one of the challenges, like you said, about owning the DOM is somehow you have to say either React, hey, React, I'm going to paint, and then I'm going to make you subservient to me, or vice versa.
Yep.
And I'm sure that's the biggest challenge of this whole thing. That's a great article. So wattenberger.com. We'll post the notes. We're going to post all the links as we usually do in our show notes. You can get that from our YouTube channel, chariotsolutions.com. If you do youtube.com/chariotsolutions, or if you head up to chariotsolutions.com and go to our podcast page, you'll see that right there. Very cool.
And there's a link I had.
Sorry.
No, that's it. That's the next one I wanted to. So I got to this page. It's a charting framework that uses D3. It's called Nivo.
Yeah.
Which I hadn't heard of, but the way I got to this was I was looking at the state of JS 2020.stateofjs.com. Every year there's like a state of JS survey, and they do a breakdown, all that stuff. So there's a 2020 version, and they use Nivo to do all their data visualizations. This has a ton of different components. If you click on Nivo, it'll give you the library of all the components. There's a ton of stuff there, ton of examples. I really want to check this out. And it's free, it's open source. They also have, like, if you look at the top, a storybook link. So they show you how to use every one of these components within Storybook. So you have kind of prototype examples. It's really nice.
Incidentally, if you're using Storybook out there, like, somebody tweet us. We'd love to hear from you anyway. So we're at TechCast. But, we've used Storybook on a number of projects. This is a way of kind of having a good reference to, the design and rollouts and things like that of our UIs. It's just a great place to go for that kind of reference, and it's very cool that they're doing that here.
Yeah, so there's so many charting libraries out there. I know for a project a couple of years ago, one of our consultants did kind of detailed research and to compare and contrast on a bunch of different charting libraries. I forget. Do you remember which one ended up using on that project?
No, I wish I did, but not instantly. It was just some weird one that I want to say it was like Chart.js or something like that, but it's definitely not going to be that.
Okay.
But it would be nice to have this then. That would have rocked.
Yes, I'm curious to see, where else this is being used and how it works with the different front-end frameworks.
Yeah, I love Storybook for this kind of thing, because like you can go through these scenarios and you can see, okay, so here's the actual React code to roll out this Nivo pie chart for formatted tooltip values, and you click, okay, what about a custom tooltip? And there's that one. And as you're going along, you can try out all these things and take a look at them. And it's just a living style book. It's called Storybook. So very cool. That's also great. Okay, let me collapse these out and do another one of mine so I don't put you on the spot every time. Deno company. Node.js. There's a company out there for that. And now there's a company for Deno. Deno is Ryan Dahl's latest JavaScript server platform. And so, beyond seeing this announcement, I haven't really dug too deep into it, but he's created a company to fund doing work on Deno, which is basically your future of server-side JavaScript instead of using Node.js in Ryan's goals.
So it's not Node backwards, but it's the NO and DE trans.
Little endian, big endian flip.
That's it. There you go. Big endian.
That sounds like it. Yeah. Binary coded characters. So it turns out, look at this. He's, in order to vigorously pursue these ideas above, which I did not read, custom runtimes for different applications, Electron style GUIs, cloud for worker style, serverless functions, blah, blah, blah. We have raised $4.9 million of seed capital. So people are interested in what Ryan is doing. And that's some money. That's the money that can keep them funded for a while if there's just a couple people working on it, and then an open source cadre of people contributing. So it's worth watching this and, following their Twitter account and following their updates. So that's deno.com is the site. And, you can find out more about it, but they're funded now. They have some funding to keep rolling, which is great.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Has he ever spoken at ET?
I don't know. I don't know. Not in my time, but it could be that he did it earlier. So we'll have to see. Let's take a look at this one, DALL-E.
So again, I got through this just by clicking on different things, and I was actually looking at another link that we'll show in a moment. So this is, again, machine learning, and it's using different models, trained models, to take a sentence or two of text, right? Some text description, some prompt, and turn that into an image. So if you scroll down, you'll see different examples of, like, here's an illustration of a baby daikon radish in a tutu walking a dog.
Of course.
It takes
as one does.
That's something you see every day in the city. And you actually see that image getting generated, an armchair in the shape of an avocado.
That's weird.
I find this one funny because my daughter and I crack ourselves up by watching and voicing the avocados for Mexico ads. If you ever have to go on YouTube,
I haven't seen those. No.
Avocados for Mexico. That's like the jingle ad. They're hilarious, and we just love doing that to like everything. So anyway, there's a bunch of examples here of how they're using this large model trained on text and images, and I didn't get into the actual details of what model is using GPT-3. There's a lot of information provided here on what that pipeline is and how it gets from text to the final image. Anyway, it's very cool that you're seeing all this stuff. Like we talked about deep fakes a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
All these things around videos and image generation and using text to go to image and image to go to text. Like information in everything we produce is just kind of becoming interchangeable, right? Like it doesn't matter what representation the information's in. Computers are getting smart enough, or they're training them to be smart enough to just see all of it as information, no matter what format you present it in. So I think this is pretty amazing to see all this stuff just exponentially improving.
Here's one, the exact same teapot on the top with GPT written on it on the bottom.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the heck.
It's literally like it's cobbling together novel images, right? Images that did not exist before, but it takes the different things and creates them. And some of them are almost like, they're kind of comical, but they're believable in the sense that if you're trying to build some like library of art, for example, and using text to auto-generate that. Now, I don't know what the licensing, like, is it using all public domain imagery, or what is that? And how is it using that? And where can you then use these generated images? But I need to spend some more time looking at this.
This is fascinating to me because you're getting to the point now where with natural language processing and understanding, audio and natural speech, and now having this ability to like put things together. Who knows how long this takes? Hopefully it's quick, but you could have a conversation with a computer and kind of brainstorm with one.
Yeah.
This is we're getting to the point where we can have the real virtual assistant that makes Siri and all the other stuff look like it's child's play.
Yeah.
And be creative with the computer. That's really cool.
It's funny you bring that up because my belief is that artificial intelligence will never truly be intelligent or generally intelligent, but I think that it'll be sufficiently indistinguishable from human behavior. So humans won't be able to perceive the difference, even though it's not actually truly like, life on its own. It won't matter because you're going to think it is.
It's the willing suspension of disbelief, right? You're playing a video game, right? Now, I don't play video games anymore because I'm ancient, but my sons play Call of Duty and all sorts of other games, and I can't even remember them. But they have non-player characters, and they really enjoy interacting with them and getting them to do things, speaking of that first article. So I think you could lose yourself in communicating with one of these systems to be creative and think through things. And it's good enough.
Those NPCs and computer players you're talking about, like they're just going to, essentially people playing and all the data they collect, they're just training those NPCs and agents to even be smarter and smarter.
Yep.
Eventually, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between a computer agent on a video game, maybe, and a human player.
All the more reason to call all the way back to that first article we talked about today, right? It's like it started way back then. It's like it's too boring to play the same game every single time. Well, it's too boring to have the same conversation with a virtual assistant every single time if it can't throw some spice into it and make it interesting. Yeah. So this is really cool. Thank you for that one.
Sure.
Awesome.
And then along with that, if you click on the link next to your tab right now.
Quick Draw.
Yeah, Quick Draw. So this is a Google-based thing. It's a page that has so far collected 50 million doodles, and it's trained a model based on that. And what you do is it tells you what to draw, and it'll let you know whether it detected that or not. And I did it on a bunch of different things like boxes, fruit, teddy bears, things like that. And it's really good, surprisingly good at being able to detect whether you've drawn what it's expecting or something else. And it'll tell you what it's detected so far.
Somehow it found out I was drawing a calendar, which is pretty funny. That thing's really cool.
The fact that they collected 50 million doodles already to do this, I'm definitely going to show this to my daughter because, again, it's one of those things like I'm starting to think of, like, are they going to have assignment grading that's automatic and done by machine learning instead of teachers?
Oh, no. First, you have to hand the assignments in. Wow, that is really cool. I wonder if it must work on an iPad. Then you could really use a stylus on it and, pencil, draw it.
Someone could make like an AI win, lose, or draw. I'm dating myself by saying that game show, but that'd be pretty cool.
Wouldn't it be cool if there's an AI abacus? Anyway, yeah, I hear you. That's where I'm going to. Hey, this is fun. You want to talk fun? It's not.
No, I don't want to talk fun. Of course.
No.
Of course.
No, you don't want to talk this fun. NetMask has been an NPM forever. It's one of those like low-level projects that everything uses. 270,000 plus projects are using it. It's vulnerable to octal input data, server-side request forgeries, remote file inclusion, and local file inclusion, and a lot of other things. And it's been like that for 9 years. So luckily, someone discovered this. But watch this. You do 0127001, and now all of a sudden you're pinging somewhere else. So just push a 0 in the front.
I knew octal input data was going to be the end of the world. I knew it.
I mean, it gets that way in YAML. You can actually accidentally make something octal in YAML. There's a bug in that, or it was for a while. Yeah, so this is kind of cool. So this is definitely being patched. I believe it might already be fixed. So if for whatever reason you're using NetMask, or you're using a project that uses NetMask, you might want to just do an NPM update and check it out. Of course, the minute you do an NPM update, your life is hell for about 48 hours. But because everyone uses a billion little packages in Node. But nevertheless, it's something to be aware of. And this is an article from sick.codes, which kind of goes through what the vulnerability is and the fact that it's being patched.
Don't use octal, people. That should be the takeaway. No, I'm joking.
Apparently.
Or anything.
Don't use anything. Anything is busted. Hey, let's talk about, you have that state of JS. You were just talking about that. State of 2020 at stateofjs.com. Go ahead.
No, so I was actually going to ask you if I had not been following this previous years where they kind of go through all the JavaScript stuff and usage and adoption and where it's, so I was going to ask you if you're familiar with this at all.
I am not, and I am embarrassed that I'm not, because I want the t-shirt.
Look at that.
So it's a survey and apparently you support the survey. I want this shirt. This is very cool.
Yeah, you totally need that shirt.
You know what? I should have it. Demographics. So let's see. This is all the countries that hit. So apparently, there was a lot in the United States and in Canada, and then less so other places for the survey. But it's 23,765 people in 137 countries. And let's see. Let's look at some of these things. Oh, cool. Interesting. So from 2016 to 2020, right? So people started Gulp in 2016 and they're, have negative opinions of, they thought it was great in 2016. I suppose some people did. Angular, let's see where Angular was, 2019 and 2020. So anyway, this is interesting stuff. I got to take a look at this.
Yeah, I like this. I like this plot actually, like the way it's doing it. Interesting.
Getting hotter, getting colder, I guess is what this means, right?
Yeah, there's like negative opinions on the left, positive on the right.
Yeah.
I saw Webpack go all the way up there.
Where is it? At the bottom left? It better be.
Top right corner.
Of course it is. It's coming back on itself. People realize they have to read Webpack and understand how it works. Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny. Everyone uses Webpack, but I defy you to bring me someone who loves it. It's the devil's toolkit. You have to use it to make modules, but it's not the easiest thing to wrestle with. So I'm not surprised it's got a vaguely negative bent to it, but it is certainly used by almost everything.
Ooh, closure scripts all the way at the bottom left.
Yeah.
People I know that do closure script, they swear by it. They love it.
Rabid.
Because they love it. People that are doing it.
Right. And, it's the same thing with closure. I mean, there are people that are super passionate. We know them that are super passionate about closure, and you can't argue them off of it because they feel the functional programming aspect of it, and they get a lot out of it. And I'm not saying anything negative about it, but it's a smaller group of people, so I'm not surprised. Same with things like Elm, Meteor is still kicking around apparently. So this is cool to look at to see what different tech. And then there's like JavaScript flavors. So
we'll to see if Deno gets up there in a couple of years.
And it's funny, it's not up there, is it?
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah. Unless I'm missing something. Here's the back end frameworks. Hey, Next.js is really taking off. It's the server rendered JavaScript engine where you can run React and have it preload all the React stuff for the first view and paint it instantly, and then behind the scenes load the rest of the application. We're using it on a few projects.
Yeah.
Express is still dominant out there. You get other ones out there like Gatsby. Gatsby was really interesting last year, and it seems like it satisfies certain itch, but not everything. Wow. So I guess what we're looking at is like the whole hype curve defined.
Yeah.
Right here.
Next.js really is becoming like the de facto tool on top of React to use
for this year.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For this, de facto for this year.
Here's your build tools again. Webpack. You are never leaving Webpack. It will always be there. And I've seen other ones out there like that are really cool, but I don't see any of them in this list. Oh, yes, I do. Parcel. And Parcel hasn't moved in its interest level, but it seems pretty popular.
What's Parcel?
Parcel is like if you create a Parcel-based project, the Parcel build tool has sensible defaults for almost everything.
Okay.
So you don't really have a big config. You might have a couple properties, and it will generate a web application target for you. But it seems, I don't know if it keeps up with everything. It keeps up with the language changes, but it just never seems to have taken off and overseeded Webpack. But now look at here, ES Build is the new hotness. So who knows? This to me is the website you go to if you want to unseat everyone in your project and make them want to run away from you, because you're like, look at these new tools that are trending. Slow down. Just because it's new this year, don't jump to it. But it's cool. I like this. I'll have to take a look at this in different years. Yeah. All right. So State of JS 2020. That's 2020.stateofjs.com. Sujan, that's an awesome one. Someone is my hero. So I have been a fan of e-ink ever since the first Kindle electronic ink readers. I just think they're the coolest thing. You can take them out. You can read them in broad daylight. I had for a while, I had Sony's ebook tool where you could actually like write with a stylus and take notes on it. It was just a little too slow to use in practice. But for reading, it's fantastic. Someone took a 32-inch e-ink TV or monitor, turned it sideways, put firmware on it, and has it hanging in their wall. And they charge it like it'll run for weeks to months. And it just wakes up periodically and downloads from a server and gets all the latest newspapers.
I love this. I absolutely love this. I mean, it looks like a real newspaper. It's very anachronistic. Like it's a piece of technology that harkens back to kind of old school, and you can kind of have that element depending on what you're going for, and kind of get like the Hogwarts kind of photo frames that are live.
Yep. I'm trying to find a good still from this thing. Let me see if I can full screen this. There it is. So that, and there's a video, and he talks about his solution, and he's a cool person. This is a really neat idea. And yeah, it can show anything really.
Yeah.
but it's not touchscreen. It doesn't have any kind of interaction. Imagine if you could do this with something where you actually can like type, tap and swipe and flip between different views and read a newspaper or on the wall. That's just so cool. So yeah, he goes through it. It's a really interesting article on the website, gregaiz.com. I made an e-ink newspaper. Oh, and also the project. I can find the code for the project on GitHub. Very cool. I love projects like that. Okay. Now I'm totally in the camp of like warning signs and like I've been down this stupid road before. Let's talk about this article.
So low code, for folks that haven't heard of it, it's been around forever, but it's becoming very, very popular again. Basically, the idea being that you're building software, but writing very little code. So you're probably like connecting different data sources and then just giving it instructions on how you want the data to be displayed. Like, okay, reading something from a spreadsheet and turning it into a form or a set of charts or, a couple of entry fields that you can then submit back. Idea being that you can build a lot of different business apps or integrate different things without having to write a lot of code. And sounds great on paper, sounds great in principle, and there's a ton of money being poured into this now in terms of VC capital and stuff like that. But again, you got to be aware of how quickly you outgrow that solution. Whether you're just building a steaming pile of mess that is going to be hard to maintain, that you don't understand the architecture behind, or you can't scale it up properly when problems occur. So this article kind of just goes through different, I think, growing pains that people have with these tools, and that you really haven't ever delivered on the promise. And we've been hearing about this for many years, usual GUI-based tools, the case tools, the 4GLs, and I mean, every decade, there's a crop of things that come out that are around hey, you don't need to code. You can just define the business rules and the app will just magically appear and behave accordingly. And it never really works out that way. That being said, I think there are some simple, clear use cases for things like these. But if you're trying to build a real app that you want to be production ready and scale up and customize in the future, you got to really evaluate where you want this app to go. What features you may have on your roadmap and what your users are going to expect, because you don't want to hit a roadblock where you can't add a feature that's like critical, and then you end up losing users because you're like, well, for us to do that, we have to rewrite the whole app now. It's going to take us a long time to do that and release. So if you're trying to build MVPs, and I'm the mindset that build a really small MVP in 4 weeks or less, these kind of tools are great to, I think, prototype some aspects of an MVP and get it in users' hands to get some real feedback.
But it's an MVP, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's an MVP. They have to remember that this is to visualize and to look through as a clickable prototype or a basic version of something that has low numbers of features. To build the real thing, it's going to take time. There's a corollary to this, which is please write me code that can write the code for me. Right? So I want you to build me a user interface that lets me write my own code. Anyone who hears that, it's folly. It's generally folly. Now, there's a difference between that and a domain-specific language. If you've got a very specific domain you have to deal with, like interpreting a particular type of file or set of instructions that you want to be able to configure it dynamically without writing code, there are some points certainly where a domain-specific language is really great. And JSON is a great domain-specific language for Webpack, for example, right? So that kind of takes it to the little more configuration extreme. But this is like, if you take that to its logical endpoint of I move blocks around the screen and suddenly it works, it has a very limited utility. So just be careful not to believe the hype.
And there's two quotes I want to read that I find interesting here. You can leave it right where it is. So it's one person is asking if you have an if statement, or do you have an if statement or equivalent? If so, those conditions need to be tested. Meaning, the minute you add if or some conditional logic, it means you're slowly, stepping out of the realm of what these low-code apps are good at, because eventually that's going to explode into more if statements and going to get complex, and you're going to have to test different cases, and they're not really, it's not easy to do that sort of testing or to write unit tests against or things like that. So it's a smell that if you're starting to do that, you may need to consider other tools. Also, what I love this quote here: people rapidly create things, rapidly deploy things, and rapidly regret things. There's one thing for certain, is that each subsequent generation of technology makes it easier to build bad solutions.
Bad solutions fast. Bad solutions fast is the word right there. Absolutely. Yeah. I completely agree with the writer. And so this is Joe McKendrick, and there's a section of ZDNet called Service Oriented. So definitely check out ZDNet. They've got great articles. I want to give them credit. And this is a good analysis of this trend.
There's only a handful of comments on the article, but they're pretty much all, except for like one, is like, yeah, this stuff doesn't work. We've tried it, and we hit a dead end, and it doesn't get us to where we need to get it to.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no free lunch.
Yeah.
I saw the same thing. We're talking about serverless the other day, and someone's like, the big giant gain of serverless is you have less code. I'm like, you still have to deploy it and configure it to deploy. And so you went from deploying one thing, a small app, a cohesive set of functions, to 40 things with 40 different configurations. So it's not like the code vanishes; it just becomes configuration around the code. That has to be deployed. Until you can figure that out and make everything there sensible, there's the amount of weight goes somewhere in the platform. And if it can go all the way to the server provider, like if you look at like serverless databases and stuff, that's fantastic, right? I don't know why I'm going on this tangent, but what the heck. But it's the same kind of thing. It's like you don't simply instantly get things to vanish for you unless something handles it. So anyway. Complete tangent, made no sense. We'll move on. Let's do this one. Ruby off the rails. This is like the complaint about code day, isn't it? It's an international complaint about code day. Code library yanked over license blunder. We've been here before, right? Sparks chaos for 500,000 projects. So there's a project called Shared MIME Info, still is. And so let's see. So the maintainer of this informed Daniel Mendler, maintainer of a Ruby library called MimeMagick, which incorporates the code. He was shipping MimeMagick under an incompatible software license, according to the Register. And this is Thomas Claiborne in San Francisco who writes this. So bottom line is somehow that got yanked based on a GPL license issue, and it broke the popular web development framework Ruby on Rails, which includes MimeMagick 0.3.5 as a dependency, and also 172 other packages, which between them touch about 500,000 different software repositories. But if you have to do builds, this is the problem I've always had with tools that are rapid development tools, kind of speaking about this. And you also have it with node-based projects as well. Put some time in your project that is non-zero to upgrade it periodically, because you have to patch it for security vulnerabilities. And sometimes when you do that, you find out that things are broken.
What exactly was this breaking? Fresh builds that weren't caching dependencies? I don't get, like, if you cache a dependency, it's probably not, depending on how you had that configured, it may not pull down the new version that would cause this to break. So I could see that if you're starting with a clean build, so I'm curious to hear who and what this was affecting.
I'm thinking, and I haven't dug deep enough with this yet, but I think if you haven't frozen your gems and stored them and checked them in somewhere, and you're building by pulling from the internet, they withdrew prior versions from distribution on rubygems.org. So basically, you can't get your dependencies anymore.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the issue. Repository management and caching and centralizing that within your organization outside of the internet, so you're not prey to things like that. It's so important to have that for sanitizing, quarantining, versioning, and making sure you have a known stable version that works when you're releasing a product. It is easier than people realize if they don't have a good process in place. It's very easy for a dependency or a version to sneak in that you didn't expect, and you don't want to find that out at runtime. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And certainly there are repository engines that will cache and download everything you need so you don't lose it, and you back that up. These are things you learn after you've been burned like 2, 3, 4 times in a row. You're like, okay, I'm not going to let this happen to me again. But it's something.
A low code approach, and then you don't have to worry about code at all.
That's right. We'll just have it cache the non-code for us. Yeah. All right. So yes, that's the Register. Again, the writer there is Thomas Claiborne on the register.com. I love this blog. The blog name is fantastic. It's called Computers Are Bad.
I love this. Like from the 1990s. This is awesome.
He's my favorite. So JB Crawford writes, computers are bad. And I brought this up because I know that a lot of people are learning computers without ever having to go through a lot of the formal junk that we all kind of suffered through in comp sci. And just in like, actually, I didn't learn the OSI model in comp sci. I learned it when I had to certify for my first teaching engagement for Microsoft. And they said, you're going to do some networking classes and you're going to learn net masks and everything else. And you're going to learn the OSI model. And I learned that in 92, something like that. I don't remember it anymore. I know what it is roughly. You know, who can spout all 3 layers? Now, or 7. But remember here, please do not throw sausage pizza away. Did you know that was the acronym for OSI?
I did not know that there was an acronym or a mnemonic for OSI. Interesting.
He's my hero for that because I didn't know that.
Physical. Really, you could never throw away sausage pizza anyway. Come on.
Right. I point this article out only because it's always interesting to read these things and just kind of refresh your memory. But certainly everything in computer programming is moving from physical to more logical, right? So from less abstract to more abstract. So you start with a physical layer of the hardware, the data link layer of actually communicating between the device and the hardware, the network layer, the transport layer, sessions on top of transports, presentation layer on top of sessions, and application on top of presentation. So that's the OSI model.
I think in the future, there's going to be a few other layers after that application one. It's going to go back to physical, but it's going to be like implant, you know, biophysical layer.
Wetware.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very cool. He goes through each of the layers and the things that are in them, you know, like, for example, what layer TCP lives in and what layer UDP lives in, and IP, you know, IP is in a lower layer than the TCP protocol on top of it, for example.
Folks, if you hear things like a layer 2 firewall or a layer 7 firewall, because people like throwing those layer numbers around to sound all fancy and make you feel like you don't know anything. So layer 7 just means the application layer. So it's a firewall, for example, that can inspect your HTTP requests, your headers, your query string, actually look at the data that's going into the request. So you're not looking at the TCP or IP level, but looking all the way at HTTP. So if you hear these layers, you know, look these up. It's not complicated, but it sounds complex when people talk about it.
Layers of abstraction on top of each other. And the more that's done at the lower layers, the more global it is to the entire thing, right? So if you've got a layer 2 thing happening at the data link layer, that means every single message that goes in and out is getting affected at layer 2. So if it's something that's really, you know, inspecting things, and I'm probably going to get the layers wrong, you know, where, you know, it's a network layer, let's say layer 3. If it's inspecting things, it's going to have an effect. It's going to potentially either slow things down or affect everything depending on how it's written and put together.
You shouldn't have to worry about layer 1 unless you're, what was that incident a few months ago where they cut fiber in Brooklyn?
Yeah.
Or what's it?
That's a layer 1 issue.
Layer 1 problem.
My hardware layer is gone. So anyway, so yeah, so computers are bad. And by the way, best website name ever, computer.rip. So yeah, so this is the neat website. The guy does a really interesting job here.
Layer 1's expensive. If someone asks you to debug a layer 1 problem, charge them a ton of money.
You get an electrical engineering degree. Okay, so that takes care of those. Oh, what's this? Incompetent developers blamed for New Zealand patent privacy breach of COVID-19 vaccine booking systems. Ooh.
So apparently, company Valiant or Valiant something, I forget the name of the company, it's mentioned in the article, was contracted out to build, you know, COVID vaccine vaccination booking site in New Zealand, and they apparently used a piece of software not properly configured, never meant for public usage, meant for internal usage, that had hard-coded IDs in the website, the web page, and allowed people to get access to all the patients, all their personal information, everything, like instant access to all this data, because someone slapped together using an existing library or package or something that was not meant for public usage like this to build a public-facing website. So, you know, they're obviously blaming the developers and saying that, you know, it was hard-coded information, the package wasn't even properly used, and it was never meant for this kind of public-facing website. So, you know, I'd love to hear more of the story behind this. Like, well, why is that? Is that because they were contracted and given an impossible deadline to get something out, and the developers felt pressure to like meet that deadline? They had to, you know, use something off the shelf really fast and within whatever budget constraints that contract probably had laid out. I mean, I don't know the details, but
yeah,
it just shows that, look, we're talking about things are happening at the national level. And you can't trust things like this. It's just scary that in a situation like this with COVID, and we saw, Ken, we talked about this before just here with different pharmacies and things like that, like the websites and the UI were atrocious and hard to get through. And in some cases, they would give back cryptic, like developer-oriented errors that they should not be giving back to end users. So this is where I wonder when I look at like, oh, okay, you're collecting a bunch of information and pressing submit and picking like an appointment slot. Like, hello, maybe this is a perfect use case for a low-code platform where the low-code platform's already been audited and tested and it's highly secure and encrypted and it can infinitely scale because it's serverless. And you don't really have to write a lot of code. You're just connecting to a database on the back end. Probably a great example of using low-code would have been vaccine booking.
Yeah, or like if you think about it, basically it's a service, right? You're using an API as a service or software as a service and having more than one group use that. That would have been, hey, if we had someone working on that for a year and then it was ready for when the vaccines are ready, wouldn't that have been a good idea?
Okay, so like this is a good case study of like, hey, no matter how simple the software is, hello world, whatever, if you're expected to turn around a website really fast that millions of people are going to potentially use, there's no way you can turn around something like that really fast and have it be stable, secure, and without errors, without a proper, maybe it's not hard to develop, but you need to provide a proper amount of testing, right?
Yeah.
Which is the same as like the vaccinations. It didn't take them, and I'll get to that in a minute, it didn't take them long to actually find mRNA sequences that are probably going to work. What took time is testing the vaccine.
Right. Right, because if you don't test the vaccine and you just roll it out there are cases where vaccines have, created birth defects and killed people because of the fact that they weren't tested and they were rushed. There was something in the 70s like that, but they're extremely rare because the laws state you have to really test these things. In IT, it's a little more difficult. There are laws, certainly, I'm sure that will, create compensation or solve problems in the end, but it's easy to write code that's breaching data. If you don't test whether it breaches data, then that's a big problem.
So hopefully they do a full postmortem on this, because I feel like the title probably, once they figure everything out, the title will probably be incompetent developers and their incompetent managers.
Yeah, it's usually not as simple as it sounds. I agree. And there's all sorts of decisions that you can end up blaming someone in the end, but what is the actual truth? We'll have to look and see if this ever comes out to any kind of audit or report. Interesting. Okay, let's see. And that is the article there. Here's an interesting one. I have not honestly had time to really review it, but I think it's something because I know who it's coming from, I think it's a good thing to use as a research for someone who's checking into what Java is doing these days, is James Ward. And he's been a friend of emerging technologies for the enterprise for a number of years. Used to be known really well for Flex and his Blaze.ds work that he did on Flex, which was the Flash-based library. A lot of Java EE. Did he do thinking in Flex? I think he did. But has since been doing a lot of Java and Scala and functional programming, if I remember correctly. And so back in 2014, he wrote an article called "Java Doesn't Suck, You're Just Using It Wrong." And so, he said, there were things that people would do is like this crazy, sequence diagram for this big giant stack to get things done, which we all have seen and worked on projects where we had a number of these pieces and layers together. But, in the end, he goes through a really good overview of like, here's where Java is today. The platform is great. The language is great. There are languages on top of it that are great. He certainly talks about Scala. So the last decade, he's been doing a lot of Scala writing, but also he's looking at Kotlin as one of the things that are really positive things that come out of the Java community. And he feels like Kotlin is a really good way of doing functional programming these days if you don't need the over-sophistication of the Scala language.
He has some strong statement in there about Scala. It feels very cutting edge, and my personal productivity feels significantly better than with more archaic languages like Go. Ooh.
That's that's a stiletto, to bring back a Zork term. You are attacked by the thief of the deadly stiletto. So he talks about all sorts of stuff in here. shows his developer workflow. He is continuous building a test container platform. So yeah, and mentions Spring Boot, which we're all somehow at some point touching and working with on different projects. And he's using Kotlin with Spring Boot. So that's his platform right now.
Yeah, I don't think Java would be where it's at right now in terms of the evolution and conversation, and still many companies are still using it. I think a lot of that really has to do with Spring Boot.
Yeah, I think it does. And I know I keep hearing about Micronaut a lot. He brings up Micronaut. I've heard of Quarkus. It's another kind of like Spring Bootish model, and I think people are using it. But yeah, you keep running into Spring Boot all the time, and it's easy to launch a simple server project in like a couple minutes with Spring Boot, and all the defaults are there and simple to use. So yeah, if you're learning writing servers in Java and you haven't seen Spring Boot, take some time and learn it. It's really worth your while. So talks about reactive programming, reactive event streaming. So this is, and he's talking about containers, like using Docker with it. So for example, he's using the adopt OpenJDK builds of OpenJDK and as an option, and gcr.io, distroless Java. I haven't seen all these tools, so I have to check this out. So anyway, interesting article. Take a look at it if you're interested in jamesward.com. That's his blog. So, and then we have one more. What's this one? Stanford scientists reverse engineer modern vaccine, post code on GitHub. Ooh.
These scientists at Stanford took like discarded vaccine that was being thrown out, or remnants of it or whatever. So they weren't, as I mentioned, they weren't taking existing vaccines that were meant for patients or taking away, lowering supply in terms of the testing they were doing, but they got basically remnants or thrown away samples, and they used it to be able to determine the reverse engineer. It's not really reverse engineering, but determine the mRNA genetic sequence, which is the basis of the mRNA Moderna vaccine, for example. One of the key elements of it. And so this article and others gets into more detail about, what in the paper, like how they did that, how they went about it, what that process was. And then ultimately that research and what they find, what they find in terms of what that actual DNA strand is. If you go to GitHub, for example, if you click on the link, the first link, okay, so this
second link.
This one actually gets into more of the detail.
Yeah, this is the motherboard article.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, great board to read. The tech.
I did not know that when I saw Vice.com, I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, okay, I'm glad I got here through Slashdot, because it's not something I would have thought of. I didn't even know about motherboard. Can you talk about it really quickly?
Yeah, it's a really good tech board. I've run into a number of good articles. We've covered articles on the Dev News, just from writers on motherboard. It's another good source of information.
Add it to my list then.
Yeah, it's a good one to flip through. And you'd be surprised. Vice has more than just what you would think Vice has. It's got some really good investigative journalism on it too. So, yeah.
So
right.
This article goes in that whole process and who these scientists are in their paper, and there should be a GitHub link somewhere there.
That's the second one. I think you're right. The GitHub post is.
Oh, there we go. So this is a PDF describing their work, and then if you go back to the repo,
yeah, I'll do that.
That one, yeah. If you click on, actually, down, maybe it's in the README itself. Scroll down for a minute. I thought it was in another file.
Oh no, let's see. Assemblies of. Maybe it's in here. There it is.
So there's the actual.
Rolls right off the tongue.
mRNA that encodes a spike protein.
Wow. Can they do this legally? I guess they can.
I think they can.
Yeah, that's good though. I mean, share the information.
If the sequence itself is something that's known now, and it's prevalent and it's out there and it's part of a virus. So it's not like it's something they artificially created. They're using a sequence that they detected in the virus itself.
Right.
mRNA vaccine. So I think it's essentially public domain. I believe.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Wow.
But pretty cool that just that little thing. That's not a big sequence at all. Is the key to all this stuff.
It's amazing. And there's so what is this? This is from the Pfizer BioNTech, and this is from Moderna.
Now you want me to get all what do you call it? Skynet on your ass? So,
please.
We're putting
Wait, where's my tinfoil hat? I don't have one. Go ahead.
Putting all this information online, like virus sequences, DNA sequences.
Yep.
What if computers start looking at that? They get smart, like, oh, look, we can start building our own viruses from what these dumb humans are putting on their websites. And they're using natural language to parse the PDF. They're using this to look, and they're like, okay, we can figure out how to build this virus on our own. Like that, honestly, part of me is afraid that this stuff gets put on there. I'm not kidding.
Security.
But think about it. Like,
oh yeah,
I know I'm. It's a stretch of the imagination, but maybe it's not.
Well, I like the movie Blade Runner. Blade Runner 2. You get the robots that the replicants.
Yeah.
Detect the replicant. So who knows? Maybe they'll make a replicant that cannot get sick, and then we'll all be obsolete.
So please, scientists, if you're listening to this podcast, which you're probably not, but you should, and hit like and subscribe to the video, please.
Of course, please. Down there, right? Somewhere
Do
there.
not train computers to build viruses, please.
Yeah, we don't like that. That's bad.
Yeah,
it's bad. So we'll leave you with that crazy thought, and and we will see you next week on the next episode of Tech Chat Tuesday. I'm Ken Rimple.
I'm Sujan Kapadia. Thank you for joining. Thanks, Ken, for being back on. It was a frightful experience doing this on my own. I mean, if I ever have to do that again, I'm going to need like a Ken blow up doll or something.
That'd be the scariest doll you'll ever buy. Yes.
Or a Ken doll with like a string that you pull and it says stuff.
I missed you too. All right. We'll see you next week.